House joins us here today. Vanessa, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show again.
Oh, well, we're very happy to have you once again. So I want to say thank you and congratulations because Sojourner House recently won a national award for your work within the community, one of only 4 organizations to do so.
That is correct, yes.
So congratulations. So I might as well say the award.
Sure.
I think I have it in here somewhere. It's the 2017 Mary Byron Celebrating Solutions Award, and it's given to organizations that are providing local innovations working to break the cycle of violence. So let's talk a little bit about, just to remind and refresh people, a little bit about what Sojourner House does and some of the programs that you offer.
Absolutely. So we are a comprehensive domestic and sexual violence agency. So we're mostly a direct services organization, which means we work directly with victims who are in crisis and trying to rebuild their lives. And we provide supportive services such as counseling and advocacy. Our biggest program is a housing program, so we provide everything from emergency shelter if someone's in an emergency situation. We have a transitional housing program, which is a longer-term housing program, and we now also do permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, so we kind of have everything on the continuum for people that need housing. And then I always like to say that ideally we want to put ourselves out of business.
Yes, definitely.
So we also do prevention work, so we're really interested in trying to prevent violence before it happens, and so we do a lot of work in the schools, specifically with middle, high school, college students, teaching them about warning signs about abusive relationships, about dating violence, about how to support your peers if you know someone else is in an abusive situation. So ideally we would like to prevent abuse before it happens.
Which I think the education aspect is so crucial, especially when it comes to younger children and youth especially. Let's talk a little bit about this award, and the reason why you were given an award is because the key word I think is solutions.
Right.
And I think that's fascinating. You mentioned, eventually you'd like to put yourself out of business, which I think all these service organizations kind of have that same mission. You want to put yourself out of business. So hopefully we can get to that, however long it takes. So one of the reasons why you were given this award was for the outstanding work that you're doing to provide services and support for the LGBTQ community, which I think is excellent. I believe I have the quote from the letter here. So Sojourner House's LGBTQ advocacy and education program effort to break the cycle of intimate partner violence served as a model for the nation, and the award is a small gift of thanks for their exemplary work. So I think that's outstanding. Talk to us a little bit about the services that you provide specifically for this community.
So we have housing options available to the LGBT community. So oftentimes when people think of a domestic violence agency, they think of a shelter for women and children. Yeah. And we do have a shelter for women and children, but we also have shelter space available for male identified victims and for trans individuals. And so I talk a lot about continuum of services. And so we really strive to make sure that any victim, regardless of their sexual or gender orientation, can come to our agency and receive services. And so we can provide housing to victims who identify as part of the LGBT community. We have an LGBTQ manager, so we have a full-time staff member who does outreach in the community. Again, oftentimes domestic violence agencies are seen as a resource for heterosexual women. And so we like to make sure that other organizations, that the community, that potential clients know that we can serve all types of victims. So we do outreach in the community. We also do a lot of trainings in the community. So we can come and actually provide LGBT cultural competency to other organizations. And so we've actually in the past year, and I think this is part of the reason why we won the award, we've been working with the Providence Police Department, training police officers on LGBT cultural competency. How do you respond to a situation? Police are often trained on how to respond to domestic violence situations, and it's usually a man and a woman, and they receive training on that. And what do they do if they show up and it's 2 men in a situation or 2 women in the situation, and how can you be sensitive to that incident and provide services and support? So we've been doing a lot of training with law enforcement officials about those issues.
And moving forward in 2018, you're continuing those, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So our housing program is actually growing. We are bringing more beds on because there's a greater need for our services. And then the educational work with law enforcement, with schools, with community groups. Sometimes we have community groups reach out and say, we'd really like to educate our staff, provide them with an overview of how to work with the LGBT community. Sometimes organizations will reach out to us and say they want to update brochures or materials, and how can they make it more inclusive to the LGBT community. Just little things like putting a rainbow flag on your door, or making using inclusive language in your materials. So we're always happy to help organizations with that kind of work.
I think that's so impressive that people are now nationwide looking to you as an organization. So not only statewide, people coming to you, but now this national recognition. So that speaks volumes. Do you think that something being where we are, being more inclusive, that might have something to do with it? Do you think that you can provide an example for areas that maybe aren't quite so inclusive?
So are you talking about the fact that we live in Rhode Island?
Maybe a more progressive community.
Absolutely. So, I do have colleagues who work in other parts of the country. Yeah. I have a good colleague who does work in Texas, for example. She said there's no way that she could run a program like we're running here in Providence.
Which is, it breaks my heart to think that, there are programs that are available, but for people in the LGBTQ community that are going through domestic violence situations that have nowhere to turn.
Absolutely. I think that is a reality. I think that Rhode Island, for the most part, is a pretty progressive place. I've been at Sojourner House for 7 years, and very, very rarely has anyone ever questioned the work that we do with the LGBT community. I would say, if anything, people are more interested in supporting our organization because they appreciate the fact that we are a resource for every victim. And I'm very serious when I say that really is our mission. We really want to be able to provide services and resources to anyone, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation, however they identify. So that's really our goal.
Do you think outreach is becoming more part of that outreach and education? We were just talking about social justice and having those conversations about race and how we can elevate our society overall just within Rhode Island. Do you think having these educational programs is becoming, like, people are desiring it more? Do you think that's will be not necessarily a bigger part of your mission, but you're going to devote more resources to that because people are more interested in it in 2018?
I think there's a lot more visibility about these issues, and I think the different issues, the ones you just named, racism, sexism, sexual orientation, I think homophobia, I think all of those issues overlap. There's a term called intersectionality where we talk about different social issues that intersect and influence each other, and that's certainly something we've been talking about within the domestic violence movement. Again, going back to this idea that we're not just here to serve heterosexual women and children. Obviously, we are here to serve them if they need resources, but just thinking outside that circle and realizing there are undocumented victims, there are individuals who identify as LGBTQ, there are individuals who are refugees. There are lots of different groups that may not have always seen domestic violence agencies traditionally as a resource. And so I do think we're living in a time where there's more visibility about these different issues and how they intersect with each other, which I think is really exciting. I think that really can provoke some interesting discussions as a community and as a culture about how we respond to things.
I think that's very true and exciting. I think that's a good word to use. Let's talk a little bit about the domestic violence aspect of this, because it is a problem within our community. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, members of the LGBT community do experience higher rates of domestic violence and sexual violence than heterosexual individuals. Obviously, your organization is providing solutions. But how do you think that we can work to make this violence, I don't know if I can say go away, but to make this less of a problem? Is it education? Is it outreach like your organization is providing? We recently, just I think, 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, we already saw a murder in Massachusetts of a trans woman. How do we work to reduce this problem?
Right. So, I think you hit on a couple of key points. I really think we're going to reduce and eliminate violence with a culture shift. And a culture shift is going to come about through education and a shift in our cultural attitudes. And a shift in cultural attitudes is us as a society reflecting on what we value. And do we value all members of our society? And I think there have been times in our history where we haven't valued everyone's value, everyone's contributions. And so I think the work that Sojourner House does, and we work with so many allied organizations that are doing amazing work in the community. And I really think it's important that we work together because we can't work in isolation. And I think the more that we raise visibility, the more that victims don't feel that they're alone. A lot of times, especially within the LGBT community, it's shifting a little bit, but there's been so much stigma, there's been so much discrimination against the LGBT community that alone was difficult enough. To then say that you're being abused by your partner on top of that, it's a double layer that oftentimes made it really difficult for people to even want to seek services. So it was something they often felt like they just had to live with. So the more that we can shift those cultural attitudes, the more that we can tell our society it's not okay to treat your partner that way, and that there are resources available, there are solutions.
Which is wonderful that we're fortunate enough to have you within our community. So we are looking ahead in 2018. So congratulations once again on this award. What are you looking forward to for this year?
So we are, of course, our hotline rings every day, and we're trying to meet the demand for our services. So we're always thinking about capacity building. How can we provide more services to the community? How can we provide more education to the community? My staff has grown quite a bit. We just brought on 3 new staff members, so some of our programs are growing. One of our new programs is actually a school-based advocacy program. So again, trying to get back to working with youth and trying to get to the root of the problem. Stopping violence before it happens is really becoming more of our focus too. So 2018, I think, is going to be, I hate to say a good year for us, because I don't even know what that means in the domestic violence world. I hate to say, oh yes, we're going to have thousands of people come to us for services. I'm glad we're going to be able to provide services to individuals. Certainly it disturbs us that there is such a high number of people who need our services, but the good thing is we are here as a resource if people need us.
But I think that's so, it's always that weird balance of how do we qualify, quantify, but if more people know that you're out there, more people are using you, utilizing these resources, because it is one of those things that underreported too, right? It's just one of those things.
Well, and when you mention that there are higher rates of intimate partner violence in the LGBT community, yes, we know that's true, but we also know that it's underreported in all communities.
It's underreported.
So, and then sometimes that's disturbing too, to think about what the rates are and the fact that that's underreported.
We don't even have the right numbers.
We don't even have the right numbers. This is something that affects everyone, whether it's personally or someone you know. I always say, everyone knows someone who has been affected by intimate partner violence.
So I'm really looking forward to the fact that you are extending that outreach into school communities and young communities, because I think there's a lot of great work that can be done with that. So that's exciting as we move forward into the new year. Any fundraisers or things that we can talk about in that area?
So sure, and actually looping back to the award, 2 trustees from the foundation, from the Mary Byron Project, are coming to our spring breakfast. We do a spring breakfast. This year it's May 18th at the Marriott downtown on Orm Street, and they're actually going to be doing a little presentation just explaining why we were selected as one of the award winners last year. So that's coming up in May. And then we also, at our spring breakfast, we give a number of community awards to our supporters and our partners. So we'll be announcing those later in the spring.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much again for having this conversation with us today. And if you are interested in any of the services that Sojourner House provides, we will, of course, put their phone number and their website on our website as well, so you can connect with them. So, Vanessa, thanks so much for joining us. We're wrapping things up here on GoLocal Live, the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Kate Nagel kicks things off here in just a few moments, so hang tight for more news and politics. I'm Molly O'Brien. Have a great weekend, everyone.